I remember going to my local shopping centre in 1997. There was a stall hosted by a popular soft drink brand that featured a circle of televisions, all of which were displaying Mario's first outing on the Nintendo 64, the gaming giant's new powerhouse machine. They offered passers-by a shot at the latest adventure from the Plump Plumber. As far as I can recall, players could hit a button on the pop-up wall whenever they found a power star within the game's Labyrinth Castle hub, for which they would be rewarded with a fix of said beverage. Looking back, it might have secretly been a horrific Pavlovian conditioning experiment examining the influence of electronic stimulation and positive reinforcement on the mindsets of modern youth, but most likely it was a promotional celebration of Super Mario 64, one of the most revolutionary games of all time. Of course, Mario wasn't an overnight success story. His releases on the Nintendo Entertainment System and its Super follow-up had already defined a genre and a generation, but now it was time for the next step. His creator, Shigeru Miyamoto, had envisioned a new Mario game while developing Star Fox for the SNES in the early 90s, impressed by its Super FX graphics chip and convinced that there was even greater potential to bring his mustachioed brainchild into 3 dimensions. Production of this next installment of Mario would begin in 1994 for the Nintendo 64, then known as the Ultra 64. In fact, the very design of the console's controller and its hardware was actually based around this idea of being able to freely move Mario around in 3D, such was Miyamoto's belief in the game. A team of 15 to 20 worked on Mario 64 for almost 2 years, starting with perhaps its most significant aspect, the camera, as well as its animation. Co-director Yoshiaki Koizumi later recalled how Miyamoto would actually act out Mario's movement in the office to illustrate his ideas for the animations, of which there ultimately would be around 200. The game was first shown to the public at Nintendo's Space World Expo in 1995 along with the Ultra 64. The release of the console itself was actually delayed in order to perfect Mario 64 in time to be a flagship launch title, alongside Pilot Wings 64 and the Japan-exclusive Saikyo Habushogi, a chess-like board game. Miyamoto asked Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi, a man notoriously hardline when it came to the quality of his company's products, for an extension to the development time, to which the head honcho duly obliged. Both were eventually released in Japan and the US in 1996, with Europe getting it the following year, being met with universal critical and commercial acclaim. Mario 64 was certainly the talk of my town when it hit the shelves. This wasn't simply a case of giving a new visual sheen to the series and rehashing ideas though. Instead of a simple left to right through a level and then on to the next one, you could now explore the entirety of Princess Peach's castle, leaping through paintings to enter individual stages. These were spread throughout the castle's floors. The more power stars you collected from them, the more of the regal abode you could access, eventually leading to the top and a showdown with Bowser. The first accessible one was Bob-omb Battlefield, which introduced you to some familiar faces like Goombas, Koopas, Bob-ombs and Chain Chomps, but from a new perspective. You can follow the main route from the plains to the top of a spiralling hill, or venture off the beaten path to explore some nooks, crannies, or even a floating island. Whomp's Fortress was similar, but introduced some more taxing, dangerous platforming challenges. Jolly Roger Bay was a mysterious, misty cove, where some seafaring would bring you to an underwater cavern, a sunken ship, and a thalassophobia-triggering eel. Check out my video on Echo the Dolphin to learn more about nightmare-inducing cartoon fish. Cool Cool Mountain was a slippery, snowy level, a trope almost mandatory in 90s platformers. Big Boo's Haunt was reminiscent of Super Mario World's ghost houses, requiring you to find some hidden routes to get out alive. I seem to recall it took me forever to figure out how to get onto Big Boo's balcony, and getting the star on the roof afterwards was a heart and mouth moment itself. Hazy Maze Cave was a mine filled with rolling boulders and toxic gas, as well as a plesiosaur lurking in its deepest reaches. Lethal Lava Land was cool, if you'll pardon the irony, but felt more like an abstract assault course compared to the other more tangible worlds. Its volcano was a fun challenge though, and had some oddly bespoke block textures. Shifting Sandland was a favourite of mine. It starts off in a harsh, unforgiving desert with quicksand, swooping vultures and weird metal, possibly sentient blocks, that'll crush you if you aren't standing in the right spot. It then, however, takes you inside the pyramid to deal with some interesting mummified takes on Whomps, as well as some hand-to-hand combat with its ancient guardians. Dire Docks was another subaquatic stage largely set in a secret subterranean dockyard where Bowser kept his submarine. No idea why he needed a submarine, or indeed how he got it in here. Snowman's Land was another wintry level which kind of felt unnecessary. Its highlights were the igloo and the deep freeze mini-maze, but they felt underdeveloped. An entire icy cave level would probably have made for a more interesting experience. I've never been a fan of Wet Dry World. Dry, it has some really frustrating platforming sections, some requiring these flippy clockwork guys. Wet, it just gets tedious to have to swim around so much. Weirdly enough, its skybox consists of pictures of places in Yemen and Egypt. Tall Mountain was a good one though, requiring some death-defying leaps and log rolling as you spiralled your way towards its summit while avoiding a hat-stealing monkey. Tiny Huge Island took a cue from World 4 of Super Mario Bros. 3, where Mario was shrunken down, or everything else got bigger? I don't know, but here you could travel through warp pipes to go between tiny and huge versions of the same level. The interplay between them would sometimes require you to take action in one to allow you to progress in the other. The castle's topmost floor is where things took a turn for the worse in my opinion. Tick-Tock Clock was a neat concept. The time at which you walked through the grandfather clock's face would affect how slowly or quickly the platforms in the level moved. I just remember it being a frustrating place for which I don't hold much nostalgia. It's nowhere near as bad as Rainbow Ride though. This one largely consists of remaining sedentary on a slow-moving magic carpet. It takes several minutes to get to its topmost area, and screwing up on its annoying obstacles will mean you'll have to start the whole thing over again. You'd need to re-enter each world several times to nab all of the power stars, as there would often be subtle differences to them depending on which mission you chose. The more of the available 120 you collected, the more of the castle you could unlock in your quest to rescue the princess from Bowser's clutches. This offered greater dominance of the game in medium and, in turn, a more genuine sense of progression and permanence. You were able to more freely manipulate and change Mario's environment to suit your own needs and desires, as opposed to the one-shot of the 2D platformers, whether it was ground-pounding columns in the castle's basement to drain the moat, changing the water level in Wet Dry World, or pissing off a penguin by invariably dropping its offspring from a cliff on each visit to Cool Cool Mountain. A particularly spellbinding aspect was the introduction of the wing cap. Not only could Mario now run, jump, backflip, stomp, punch, kick, dive and climb, but he could also wing to the sky in a cathartic Y-axis, taking in these vistas from a perspective a million miles away from the limited flight of Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario World. By the same token, now that Mario could move in 360 around the Mushroom Kingdom, so too could his enemies, from lowly Goombas to a haunted hungry piano. Gone were the days of trying to kick Iggy Koopa off a flat rocking boat or bopping a foe in the head 3 times. Battles became more spatially aware. You now had to grab Bowser's reptilian tail, swing him in a circle by spinning the control stick, and try to pinpoint the trajectory of your throw to land the fire-breathing, princess-snatching villain on a conveniently placed bomb. It was at times a frustrating task, but one that forced you to embrace the tactility of this world as much as possible. While he looked infinitely more menacing, thankfully he only required one hit in 2 of the 3 run-ins, and you could tell he was still a bit dim when it came to dungeon design, forgoing his suicidal axe placement of old for an encompassing wall of explosives. It wasn't just the visuals that had extra dimension to them though. Several of the enemies who had before been pretty nondescript obstacles now had thoughts and feelings. Koopa the Quick, instead of attacking Mario in a speeding shell, simply wanted to have a foot race. 2 factions of Bob-ombs were waging war between each other in some sort of unexplained conflict. The Womp King revealed his reason for his people's trademark teeth grit and rage, and Wiggler finally resolved his anger management issues instead of just charging aimlessly. Imbuing them with an admittedly modest degree of personality still went some way to colouring an already vibrant series with a sense of characterisation that had been somewhat limited in the 90s platformers. This would be expanded upon even more in Paper Mario a few years later, but we'll talk about that in a future video. These mysterious lands and evocative characters soon led to popular gaming myths. The most infamous is a statue in the castle's courtyard that seemingly reads L is real 2401, which led to the belief that Luigi was unlockable in the game. He wasn't, but funnily enough, 24 years and 1 month after the game's release, a beta version leaked online which showed unused assets including a polygonal model and voice recordings for Luigi. This timing was purely coincidental though, as the inscription on the statue is nothing more than an illegible genetic asset. It was even reused in The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and as a self-referential Easter egg in Super Mario Odyssey nearly 20 years later. Other more dubious legends include the Wario apparition, Wet Dry World's negative aura, and each copy of the game being personalised. There's an entire iceberg of these obscure facts and ridiculous theories attributed to Mario 64, which other videos go into detail on, but suffice to say it left a mark on the fandom's collective imagination. It's also spawned a healthy speedrunning community, in which players compete to finish the game in the fastest time under various conditions. It's consistently among the most played on speedrun.com, and this has led to some heart-stopping hyper-parkour playthroughs, the current world record for which is under 6.5 minutes including mandatory cutscenes. It's a game that's been lovingly torn apart in an effort to find quicker methods of completion. For years there was a $1,000 bounty up for grabs for anyone who could recreate a bizarre time-saving glitch in TikTok Clock, which happened during a run by player Dota Teabag. It was later determined that a stray ionising particle from space had tampered with the game's binary code, resulting in Mario's sudden upwards teleportation. The odds of this happening were quite literally astronomical. Unsurprisingly, such an influential game has remained widely available, brought to various platforms through the years. Most significantly, it was remade as Super Mario 64 DS in 2004, which added Luigi, Wario and Yoshi as playable characters, along with bespoke stages and minigames. These elements were well received, but its awkward controls due to the DS's lack of an analog stick came under fire. I liked it enough, but I'd probably recommend the more raw experience of the original first. As well as appearing on the Wii Virtual Console in the 2000s, Mario 64 was part of the 3D All-Stars package on the Switch in 2020. This was another divisive one, more so for the lack of effort or polish that went into bringing the game to a new generation. 3D All-Stars was a limited edition release though, because Nintendo got a Nintendo, so the most convenient legal way to play Mario 64 now is probably the Switch Online expansion. Not only has it enjoyed its own reincarnations, but Super Mario 64 also paved the way for the Nintendo Icon's console-defining titles in the years to come. Most notably, its floating obstacle courses helped create the irreverent gauntlets from which the game's immediate descendants would draw their best moments. Super Mario Sunshine's bonus stages saw your gimmicky flood device taken away, leaving Mario to navigate a more traditional level. It was a welcome break from the rest of that game, which mainly involved cleaning up piles of sludge. It turned out having Mario actually do his job as a plumber wasn't entirely fun, and the tropical themed romp subsequently proved controversial in the annals of Nintendo history. The Wii's Galaxy and the Switch's Odyssey, on the other hand, were far more worthy sequels. If Mario 64 made premonitions about the future of platforming, like a nerdy Nostradamus, then these entries were its vision fully realised and actualised. You can still feel its DNA woven through these more refined titles. In fact, upon starting Odyssey, I actually found myself mentally comparing its controls to those of Super Mario 64. Things are tighter now, but 64 must have permanently toned my muscle memory, forever shaping my sense of how a game should handle. Galaxy and Odyssey might top it in many areas, but it's the originality, cultural significance and associated lore of Super Mario 64 that makes me hold it in a particular reverence. All of this is why Mario 64 still matters. It stands as a historic waypoint in gaming's evolution, taking the iconic genre-shaping premise of his 80s output and expanding it into an equally revolutionary precedent for game design. Imitators and claimants to its throne would soon follow in Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong, Conker, Spyro, Croc, Glover and Gex to name a few, while its essence is still palpable in the more modern A Hat in Time, Yooka-Laylee and Super Lucky's Tale. While its ambitious polygons might not have aged well, even compared to its immediate competitors, its importance and emotiveness make it a game I consider myself thankful to have had in the formative stages of my gaming life. We can only hope that the palpable passion and eternal star quality of Super Mario 64 remains a source of inspiration and aspiration for developers for many years to come.